What I would say is it's not necessarily new to us in terms of, kind of the gist of what they're trying to do with the edge computing. But, we embrace AI across the board and being able to make operations more efficient. And then, really it's about being able to optimize what you're sending over the satellite link so that you're, saving costs, you're maximizing your operational efficiency, you're getting the data you need, but you're also processing a lot of that data at the edge. And you may or may not be employing AI to help make those decisions.
Welcome back to the Industrial. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, CEO of AGP. And our guest today is Ian Itz, Executive Director of Internet of Things at Iridium. Iridium is a mobile voice and data satellite communications network that spans the entire globe, enabling connections between people, organizations, and assets to and from anywhere in real time. In this talk, we explored how satellite network connectivity and advancements in satellite-connected IoT modules are paving the way for larger remote data transfers. We also discussed the enablement and adoption of satellite AIoT for edge use cases, where smaller or faster IoT modules are harnessing satellite connectivity and offloading more compute to the cloud for AIoT engine decisioning. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you'd like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, you can email us at team@asiagrowthpartners.com. Finally, if you'd like to discuss technology, innovation, and growth challenges in Asia, please email me directly at erik.walenza@asiagrowthpartners.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
Ian, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Eric, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's good to have you guys back. So I spoke with one of your colleagues about 4 years ago. We'll put that in the show notes. So if anybody is listening to the podcast here and you want to have a deeper dive on what Iridium was doing in 2021, at least, you can check out that episode. This is a fast-moving industry, so I imagine actually there's probably been quite a few updates. Ian, I know you're coming in particular from the IoT line of the business. Before we jump into the topic, can you give us a little bit of background personally on how did you end up in this kind of unique space within the broader IoT market?
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. So I started my career building small satellites for the Navy and the Air Force with a small company called AeroAstra, that's no longer in business these days. But that's kind of where I got my start in satellite. And then being part of the industry, I'd always kind of looked at, who are the big network operators. And Iridium kind of stood out as kind of a class act in terms of what they were providing. And it was a technology that I was exposed to my previous role. So I applied for a job as a product manager, and I was onboarded about 12 years ago. And so I began my career at Iridium primarily as a product manager around our IoT modules. And so I focused on our small aperture devices, 9602, 9603, was responsible for that product line for many years, transitioned into some business development. And then not long after that, I've kind of taken over the role of the general manager of the IoT line of business here at Iridium. And so that's kind of what I've been doing and how I landed in this particular position.
Yeah. And when you first landed at Iridium, was the commercial sector already the primary focus, or at that point, was it still more of a government focused business?
The commercial business was up and running and was very healthy at that point. We were transitioning from what we used to call M2M to IoT at that point. And so it was a really interesting time in Iridium when I joined because we were just getting ready to launch the new batch of satellites. And so it was a really exciting time. We had kind of put all of our eggs in one basket as it relates to the launching. And we were one of the first to go with SpaceX as a launch partner. And so being part of kind of the rejuvenation Iridium, the transition of the business unit from M to M to IoT, And really IoT, these days at Iridium is our fastest growing unit. But it was just a really exciting time to be there. Launching satellites into space and being able to attend some of those launches has been, one of the highlights of my career. And it's just, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was a brave time to be in the industry, right? Because really until on the one hand, IoT matured, and on the other hand, the cost of sending satellites into space came down, right? It was really quite a niche business and seems like a shaky business for the first years. Now, obviously, the technology on both sides has matured and there's much more robust, demand and scale. It would be great. I know we're going to focus on IoT here, but it'd be great if you could give everybody listening kind of the 101 on Iridium's business so we can understand what are you selling, how do you sell it, who do you sell it to, and then we can dive more into the IoT line that you're running.
Yeah, absolutely. So Iridium is a satellite constellation. We're a LEO orbit. We run about 75 satellites, and that includes the operational, in-orbit devices as well as our spares. And we are a global network. So we are a polar orbit, which means that our satellites cover the entire globe as they're traversing in their orbits. And we provide service to a variety of sectors. As we mentioned, we do a lot of government work, IoT, we do aviation, we do maritime, and we do land mobile. So that's the side of the business that does the satellite phones, as an example. So we're quite varied in what we do in terms of the types of customers that we service. We're primarily a wholesaler. And so we deal primarily with partners. Partners are our lifeblood as it relates to our business and IoT specifically. So we go to market through global partners, and they're operating their niche applications all over the globe. And whether that's fishing, industrial IoT, SCADA applications, heavy equipment, mining, we're in a variety of industries, basically anywhere that needs connectivity. Iridium is there to provide reliable, always on global connectivity. So we're really good at kind of global deployments and being able to manage the waters as it relates to getting your device into pretty much any country, any location that you need to operate in. And so that's been our calling card for quite some time. But I'd stress that, again, we've been doing this for a long time, and the evolution of our business is something that's very important to us. And so one of the things that we always do is try to bring all of our services with us as we bring on, new network elements. And so we've never sunset any services. And that's really about, IoT specifically. Those devices are in the field for many, many years at a time. And so we don't want our customers to have to up and replace devices as we change network characteristics. And so, one of our big things is to ensure that we don't sunset services as old as they might be while bringing on some of the newer, more exciting technologies that we'll talk about here in a bit.
Yeah, no, I imagine that's important to a lot of your infrastructure customers. I know a lot of companies like to put an asset, a sensor out in the field and ideally not touch it too much for maybe 10 years, right? So that's it's an important part of their business to be able to have that security that it's going to continue to operate for the lifetime of the device. Can you help us understand within the IoT space, where are we and what's kind of the state of the art today in terms of bandwidth? So for remote data transfers, in terms of latency, I know there's been a lot of progress recently in terms of improving the performance of connectivity for remote devices. So where are we today? And then if you can share a little bit on that trajectory, what are the metrics that we're monitoring that are kind of moving the industry forward in this space?
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about IoT specifically, I think kind of what we're seeing is a move towards a standards-based approach, right? And so we see that as part of our general strategy, but overall we see that in other networks as they begin to adopt kind of a more standards-based approach, right? So kind of where we are today is Iridium is still developing our own modules. We've got a suite of IoT modules that we manufacture and that we distribute. And those are running our proprietary protocols. And those are, as I mentioned, our devices like the 9602, the 9603, which run our short burst data. And then we've got our 9704, which is a newer module that offers a little bit more throughput and capability, but still the same size and cost of the previous generations. And so kind of where we are right now is transitioning from this very proprietary closed environment to a more standard and open environment. I still see the need for having both of those applications in place, in time. But I think that's really kind of the trend that we're seeing is really this move towards NTN is really kind of the big catchphrase at the moment. So what we're doing on our end is, we're converting a few bands of the network to be able to handle the NB-IoT standard that's from 3GPP. So Later this year, we'll be going on air, with a few devices with Nordic Semiconductor, and they'll be testing our network capabilities running NB-IoT over the Iridium network. And so we'll be offering both of those services to our customers, the proprietary and the standards-based approaches. But I think, to answer your question more directly and where we're seeing things, we're really in an environment now where customers want to be able to buy the chip of their choosing and have a variety of different radios on that chip for backup communication or for primary comms. And so I think what we'll see are, more companies like Nordic adopting satellite capabilities, and Iridium will be there to provide a standards-based approach for those companies that are wanting to do that. And so I think that's what we'll see. So we'll see more mainstream chip manufacturers providing satellite connectivity on the back of their existing modules. And so I think that's kind of where we're headed from that device perspective. I think, always it's about cost. And so cost will continue to be driven down as, more manufacturers enter the space. And that's kind of how I see it, from my end as it relates to the modules and the technology. From an IoT perspective, from a data throughput perspective, I think that there's plenty of applications in IoT that are less than a kilobyte a month in terms of their usage, right? They're just sending very small amounts of data. And so, from that perspective, we'll continue to offer devices that push the boundaries and that offer more data. But I think there's still a sweet spot of IoT, which is still very low data rate, very low power, and meant to be out there for years and years at a time. And so I think we're going to see, more applications that are using higher throughput, but I think we'll continue to see the traditional low throughput sensor-driven IoT applications continue to thrive.
Okay. And this shift towards a standards-driven approach, does this impact your business models? Or, I suppose you're providing the connectivity, and then I'm not sure if you have a business model around the proprietary protocol, but does that impact your business model, or is it primarily kind of a shift in terms of just the middleware that companies are deploying on their modules?
Yeah, it'll be a slight shift. I mean, we still go to market as a wholesaler today, right? So that's the same intent is for us to go to market as a wholesaler, when we enter NTN, 3GPP, NB-IoT. And so from that perspective, I think we're well versed in being able to deliver those types of services to our partners. I think what we'll see now, though, are going to be, more partnerships from Iridium. We just announced a partnership with Cineverse. And that's going to be a partnership that enables us to be able to better deliver our services more ubiquitously, right? Cineverse is a global operation, much in the same way that we are. And so I think what you'll see are maybe just more distribution partnerships through Iridium, but the wholesale model remains the same for us. And it's proven to work, in our situation, in our case. And I think, we'll have to make some modifications and adopt to kind of the new world that we're entering. But for the most part, it should be a apples to apples transition for us.
Gotcha. And you mentioned an acronym a few minutes ago, NTN, non-terrestrial networks. How does that differ from the way we might think about satellites operating, let's say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the thing. I mean, NTN has always been the thing for me, right? I've always, worked for NTN, for a non-terrestrial network. And so it's really, I think, being brought more into the mainstream, and that's really through the standardization that I talked about before. And so 10 years ago, I think satellite was very similar to the way that it is today, still providing, ubiquitous service to, locations and customers that were outside of terrestrial coverage. But I think what we see now is really that more standardization. It's become more of a desire for terrestrial carriers to have that capability for their customers. And so I think that's how, the industry has changed over time. But at its core, it's still providing satellite connectivity to, locations that are, compromised from a terrestrial coverage perspective. And so I think that's kind of the big shift, is really the attention that's put on it now, and this kind of shift specifically around consumer to have these capabilities on your smartphone or on your wearable device, becomes more important to those companies that are selling those services.
Okay, clear. Let's discuss some of the major use cases here. I'm quite interested in what trends, and I guess there's trends in terms of device categories. There might also be trends in terms of customer segments. I suppose there's certain customer types, like the military, like maybe an offshore oil and gas company that was investing in these solutions 20 years ago because they had a very strong need and they had a business case. And I imagine there's other customer groups, for example, consumers, maybe in developing countries, who absolutely could not afford this technology before where those uses might now be more viable for them. So if you look at the major product categories or device categories and then the major customer segments, where are you seeing the most growth in the recent years or in the coming few years?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a great question. So, I mean, the way that I kind of divvy up the business, the IoT business at Iridium is kind of two different ways. We've got everything that falls under consumer, and then we've got everything that falls under what I call industrial IoT, right? So consumer is obviously IoT that's driven by a person or a user. And so that business continues to thrive at Iridium. It has been very strong since its inception. And so we are very focused on the consumer and how the consumer can use the Iridium network, right? So again, the way that we operate is through a wholesaler, but we go to market through our partners that are experts in those, particular categories. And so, those partnerships are really kind of what drive the adoption of the consumer market. In the industrial IoT side, it's quite varied. It is all the things that you mentioned. It is industrial IoT for the most part. So heavy equipment is a big market for us. Regulated fishing is another big market for us. So ensuring that fishing markets are staying within the waters that they're supposed to be fishing in. Catch reporting. Those types of applications. But those tend to be kind of the more burgeoning or fastest growing segments within our business. But yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it right on the head, right? We have to provide both services that are applicable to the consumer and applicable to the industrial IoT space, but they're also quite regional in terms of their delivery as well. And so those partnerships that we have across the globe allow partners to sell similar products, but they're geared to their very specific industries, their specific regions, right? So whether that's an Asian manufacturer building a consumer device for that market, or whether it's an OEM in a particular market that's attracting very particular regionalized type of sale, those are all key aspects that we look at in terms of how we're distributing our product, right? So it's not only a regional sale in terms of being able to work with the partners to provide very specific products for their regions, but it's also being able to provide airtime and services that make sense for those partners if they want to do global deployments. And so I'm not sure if I answered your question 100%, but I think, again, both sides of that business are growing significant for us, both the consumer side and the industrial IoT side. But the underlying service that we provide is still that Iridium kind of core network. And it's really what our partners are doing and kind of manipulating and offering, new features and adding value to what we do. And that's really kind of the lifeblood of the business primarily. But I mean, again, going back to what are the drivers of the IoT business today at Iridium, I'd say it's a pretty good split between consumer applications and industrial IoT. And that, as I mentioned, that industrial IoT runs, deep in our history. A really good example, one that I can point to that's using a little bit higher throughput today. So we launched this 9704 product at the end of November last year. It's a very small module, uses the same types of antennas that we used before. So very small packet antennas, able to be packaged into very small devices, but able to send more extreme data. So able to send images, able to send voice snippets and things of that nature. So there's a company in Norway called Heimdall Power, and they've created this really neat product called the Neuron. You can look it up online. Again, Heimdall Power out of Norway. And they've created these grid sensors that are essentially monitoring the power lines all over Europe in their location. So they can attach this Neuron device. It's got the 9704 inside, and they're able to monitor the load on the network. They're able to monitor tilt, for example, on the power line. And so these are applications that were not necessarily possible for them using some of our earlier technology, but continuing to invest in kind of IoT and being able to provide more powerful modules for some of those higher end use cases attracts customers like Heimdall that really want to push the boundaries of what's possible from a satellite perspective. And so that's just one example of a kind of new application, brought by a partner simply by engaging with Iridium. We kind of talk about what's possible, and they're able to go off, take our core module and create a very compelling solution on top of that. And again, I kind of keep going back to that, but Iridium's IoT business wouldn't be where it is today without the innovation that our partners bring. And really, my job is to provide technologies that they can morph into something great. And so seeing something, like Heimdall Power's Neuron solution come to market with, our solution that was just released in November, is pretty special for me. And so I think that's the benefit that we provide is the core value of the Iridium network.
If you're still listening, then you must take technology seriously. So I'd like to introduce you to our case study database. Think of it as a roadmap that can help you understand which use cases and technologies are being deployed in the world today. We have cataloged more than 9,000 case studies and are adding 500 per month with detailed tagging by industry and function. Our goal is to help you make better investment decisions that are backed by data. Check it out at the link below, and please share your thoughts. We'd love to hear how we can improve it. Thank you, and back to the show.
Yeah, I think a lot of these use cases, they were technically feasible maybe 20 years ago. I mean, some certainly weren't, right? Maybe if it's a higher bandwidth. I think often they were technically feasible, but the business case just didn't make sense, right? And that feels to me in a lot of the IoT space that it's the cost of connectivity coming down to a point, the cost of the hardware coming down to a point where whether it's a consumer device or it's a remote sensor, all of a sudden you can make a strong business case around this. Can you help us understand, maybe if we use two examples? One could be Heimdall's Power Neuron, or Heimdall Power's neuron sensors. So that sounds like it's a bit more of a sophisticated solution, a higher end connectivity. The second could be maybe a consumer device, like maybe I don't know what that might be for you, but let's say I have a child. I don't know if this is a solution you offer. I'm sitting here in China. So I can tell you there's latent demand for being able to track your child anywhere they are in the world. So let's say you have a consumer device that requires kind of a lower cost model. What would be the pricing mechanisms for the higher end and the lower end of your range of solutions?
Yeah, so for the higher end range of solutions, it's very similar to a standard cellular plan. You buy a device, you buy a monthly plan for that device, and then you're able to send data according to that plan. You're able to top off your data. We offer bulk plans. And so we really are kind of flexible in the way that we offer customers to use the network. And so that's extremely important when we're operating as a wholesaler. And so, from that perspective, it's really just looking at the markets, and we do price to specific markets, right? So we, different markets carry different, value. And so, we do have kind of disparate pricing throughout our operation. But what I would say is that it's fairly level across the board. So we don't necessarily price any different for consumer than we would for IoT. It's still very similar, a wholesale approach. We're still providing usage data. We're providing a fee for monthly access. And that's pretty much it. We try to kind of keep it very simple for customers to be able to buy the data from us wholesale and then repackage that into solutions that make sense for their partners. Now, what I would say is that, if we're going back to the child tracking application, right, and kind of where that lies within Iridium's kind of, set of features, what I would say is that as we shift towards NTN, those types of applications with Iridium on board will begin to make, more sense, right? So think about a wearable, for example, a watch, and the child has a watch that might be cellular connected most of the time, or maybe it's on a LoRa or something local, but it's connected via cellular technology. But, if that child or if that watch were to go outside of terrestrial coverage, it would be able to roam on to Iridium and then be able to, close that link, send a message and locate that child. And so I think, as we move towards, a more standards-based approach and more of these organizations like Nordic taking our technology and embedding it into theirs, you'll begin to see, a lot more things like wearables, consumer devices that have Iridium technology kind of already baked in. And whether the consumer knows it or not, they will have the ability to transmit both at the terrestrial level and at the satellite level using the same piece of device, same watch, same kit. And so I think that's kind of where we're headed from, the connectivity perspective. And it may, Iridium in most cases will be obfuscated to the user. They won't know that they're on the Iridium network or what satellite network they're on. But I think that'll be part of the beauty of the types of services that we'll offer in NTN.
There's one metric, I'm not actually sure how important this is for many of your use cases, but for this particular use case, it would be important. But this metric of granularity of location tracking, how is that developing? So what I mean by that is, how accurately can you pinpoint the location of a sensor on your network?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And that brings up a variety of different kind of concerns from a security perspective that are going on, in the world today. I think in general, customers attach, a GPS chipset to their Iridium solution. So they're pulling location off of, GLONASS or GPS or, Baidu, whatever they happen to have in their region. So from that perspective, they're using an offboard technology to be able to kind of locate their device. On top of that, we do provide geolocation services on top of the transmissions that we send, right? So you'll get not only your kind of internal GPS position, but you'll also get a position from Iridium. So we give you, an approximate location based on the triangulation that you have with the satellite network. On top of that, we now have a new service, which is called PNT, or position and timing. And an Iridium PNT, or Iridium timing and location, is a way for users to be able to validate where they are with even more granularity. So this is a new service that we have just launched. It was part of a company that we invested in early on called Satellus, still using the Iridium network. So Iridium acquired Satellus about 2 years ago. We're now starting to bring that position and timing service to our commercial users. So it's been something that's been primarily used in the government space. But as you can well imagine, nefarious actors in a variety of locations are spoofing GPS or doing weird things with GPS. And so what Iridium offers is this additional enhanced capability to be able to not only determine the fact that you're being spoofed or that your GPS position is compromised, but also be able to determine the moment in which it happens. And so the detection of that. So that's a service that we offer on top of our standard services. And so we have a group of customers that are interested in making sure that they have validated GPS across their operation. And so that's a service that we will continue to push into the commercial market, and it'll make its way into IoT inevitably, right? There are IoT customers that, want to ensure that their asset is exactly where they say it is without, the presence of, any nefarious type of action going on their devices. And so that's a really new service for us, really key service for us, really exciting service for us. And we see it very much complementary to our IoT business for those types of customers where security, identification of an authorized user, as well as, location are all able to be verified through this type of service.
Gotcha. There's one topic that we haven't touched on yet, which I think is becoming increasingly important, the topic of AI for IoT or AIoT. Certainly this is an important topic in the IoT field in general. Or satellites, I'm not actually sure how much satellites play in this space right now. What is the role for satellite networks in enabling AIoT for edge cases?
That's another really good question. I'd say that, obviously AI is the big, buzzword these days, and, it wouldn't be a complete conversation without including that. And so, AI can be used in a variety of functions, across a network, right? So it could be used theoretically to help fly satellites. It could be used to ensure that you've got, proper capacity in the right locations. And so, those are ways in which, satellite operators could leverage, AI, inside of their operation. What I would say is that operators that have been providing IoT for some time have been the pioneers of AI in all reality. I mean, in satellite specifically, there's a high cost to be able to send your data. And so customers early on found out that by processing the data at the edge versus sending it all back to a server somewhere to be processed was an operational efficiency, saved a lot of money to be able to process the data at the edge and then send over the satellite link only the data that was, very, very much required or needed. So our customers specifically, have always been at the forefront of edge computing, right? And so within that, the adoption of AI and machine learning is very natural for them, right? So our customers have been adopting those technologies for some time. Now that it's more in the mainstream, it's obviously more evident and it becomes more of a selling feature for some of those devices. But yeah, what I would say is it's not necessarily new to us in terms of, kind of the gist of what they're trying to do with the edge computing. But, we embrace AI across the board and being able to make operations more efficient. And then, really it's about being able to optimize what you're sending over the satellite link so that you're, saving costs, you're maximizing your operational efficiency, you're getting the data you need, but you're also processing a lot of that data at the edge. And you may or may not be employing AI to help make those decisions. But it's very much been something that's part and parcel to satellite, especially satellite IoT. Whether it was AI back then, it was still taking data, making decisions at the edge, and then confirming or providing acknowledgement on the backside of what happened.
There's a couple other technologies that have been, well, let's say, impactful in some use cases. I'm thinking 5G has probably been less impactful than we anticipated 5 years ago. But that's 5G and also NB-IoT. I think NB-IoT, narrowband Internet of Things services, also have a lot of potential. How is satellite interacting with those two technologies?
Yeah, so for the most part, I think what we're really trying to do is be able to offer a variety of services to our partners, right? And so I think from an NB-IoT perspective, it's a widely adopted IoT protocol, and so we want to have that capability, in our toolbox, so that customers that need that are able to have that. And so really, I think from that perspective, we're trying to be a service provider that is providing low rate data, whether it's on a proprietary or standards based approach. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I think, we'll have a variety of options ready for our partners. And so that's, for NB-IoT, for 5G and kind of, some of the cellular technologies, I think, we'll continue to evolve as those continue to evolve. We're always going to be part of 3GPP. And so as those releases continue to move, we'll be ready for release 19. That is the release that, that the Iridium frequencies get added and that we begin to be able to go on network. And so I think for us, it's really just coalescing around having an option for partners no matter where they are. So if they need satellite connectivity as backup and they're primarily on a cellular network, we want to be there for them. And if they're primarily only in satellite connectivity, we want to have modules and devices that are built for purpose for that. So, I think as we move forward, we're always going to be having kind of this split approach of core satellite proprietary technology and then having standards-based approaches for those customers that need those types of solutions.
Yeah, great. Well, Ian, thank you. I'm not an expert in this space. What questions have I not asked you that are important for folks to understand?
No, I think you've asked all the pertinent questions. I think, one of the things that, I kind of tell our partners is to just do the research, do the due diligence as you're selecting a satellite network. These networks, Iridium included, we all offer something slightly different. We're not a broadband play like Starlink. We're not a geo constellation. So we've got, different attributes as it relates to our connectivity from a LEO perspective. And so, yeah, no, I think we've really kind of touched on all aspects and not much left to be talked about. But I do think that, yeah, it's just important for people to really kind of understand, all the capabilities of all the different networks, right? And so I think that's, if you're interested in IoT, if you're interested in satellite, there's plenty of information out there for you to kind of get that education and understand, what are the core capabilities of these networks and, what are the services and capabilities that they'll be able to offer now and then into the future as things evolve.
Just one last question. So let's imagine that somebody, a product manager is developing a product. They want to make it satellite connectivity enabled. What's the right approach? Do they then buy modules from the different providers and just do a test run over a couple months to determine which one, which attributes best meet their requirements? So is that the right approach? Because I imagine you can kind of look on marketing materials or you can look on the specifications, but that might not give you, as a product manager, a perfect understanding of how is the device going to actually perform in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to provide as much of that information up front. So if we talk about our latest module, which is the 9704. So with that product, we put all of the design specifications, libraries, schematics. It's all available on GitHub. So you don't have to be an Iridium partner. You don't have to sign any kind of secret document to be able to get access to the stuff. So we've made everything kind of available at that level. So kind of more of an open source approach. So that's kind of just the documentation and getting an understanding of both the network and kind of the underlying protocols and kind of what it would take to be able to implement the product. From there, we offer development environments and kits to all of our partners. So we've got great kits around pretty much every one of our modules. And we've got, some new modules coming at the beginning of next year that will have Iridium, we'll have cellular LTE, we'll also have GNSS all in one module. And for those modules, we provide kind of all-inclusive dev kits that come with airtime. So you're able to just buy those online. We'll send you a kit, comes with free airtime. And literally from the time that you get that box at your doorstep, it's about 4 or 5 minutes before you're transmitting with the network, right? You kind of pull everything out. It's got a battery. It's got an antenna. You kind of, screw the antenna into the board, plug in your battery, plug it into your laptop, open up a terminal and send some commands. And you're sending data over the satellite network almost immediately and getting an understanding for latency, for message throughput, for satellite positioning, and where my device needs to be to get the best coverage. So we offer that kind of on day one, so you can get a really good idea of how the network operates, how your device might operate. But from there, we give you the hooks into the dev kit to be able to add whatever processor you want to run. You can plug your existing application into it. So it's a very open dev kit from that perspective. But really, it's about enabling the developer, right? So providing a least amount of barriers for them to test the network, test the devices, get a good feeling for what they're trying to do. And then if it's that product manager that you mentioned, they've got a pretty good basis at that point for what the network's capable of, and they're able to go pitch an idea kind of internally, in terms of a development. And they've got a pretty good idea at that point, what it takes technically. At that point, we would have had conversations around pricing. And so they've got a pretty good idea of, what it would take to bring that product to market. And then we walk them through the certification process, right? So that's another kind of important aspect of it, but we're there to help partners get through that. And at the end of the day, it's about delivering quality, products on a quality network. And so, it's really about fostering the developer, and whether it's a product manager, an engineer, purchaser, whoever it happens to be, we want to give them the ability to kind of test drive the network on their own terms.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, thanks a lot for joining me on the show today and sharing this update.
Absolutely, Eric. Thanks for having me, and certainly appreciate you reaching out and having another conversation with Iridium.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@iot1.com.